Eastern philosophy. Kids tend to like Eastern philosophy. It's a lot different from Western. Eastern philosophy means India, China, Japan, Asia in general. And the way they look at life is a lot different.
They're found wherever grass grows on the planet, yet their labours go almost entirely unnoticed. One of the most remarkable is found here, on the grasslands of South America. These blades are so tough that virtually no large grass eaters can stomach them. Yet they're harvested on an industrial scale by tiny grass cutter ants. But they themselves can't digest one bit of it. So why bother? The answer is underground, and it's very ingenious. Each blade is cut to length and placed into a garden of fungus. The rotting grass feeds the fungus, and in turn, the fungus feeds the ants. But feeding 5 million workers requires intensive agriculture. Luckily, they are an industrious lot. This colony alone will collect over 1/2 ton of grass every year. With billions of ant colonies across the world's grasslands, all doing exactly the same thing, that's a mind-boggling amount of grass. It's estimated that over 1/3 of the grass that grows on Earth will be harvested by an insect. In northern Australia, termites memorialize their industry in sculpture. These astonishing mounds are 10 feet tall. They're always built on a north-south axis, which is why their builders are called compass termites. These castles of clay protect their builders from extremes of heat and seasonal floods experienced on many grasslands. Termites manage to do what most grass eaters can't: break down dead grass and extract the nutrients. But they themselves can be food for those that can reach them. A 2-foot-long tongue, covered in microscopic hooks, followed by claws longer than those of a velociraptor. A giant anteater on the plains of South America. It can devour 20,000 insects a day. Powerful forelegs enable it to rip apart a termite hill with ease.
a cup of tea. There's a story of a Zen master who was visited by an American college professor, and the college professor wanted to know everything he could know about Zen, the philosophy. And instead of asking the Zen master, the college professor just went on babbling and babbling about everything he understood about the philosophy. And it just went on and on and on. And the Zen master just looked at him kind of curiously and said, "Would you like some tea?" And the college professor stopped talking for just a moment to put his glass out, his cup out, and then continued babbling about everything he understood and how he analyzed Eastern philosophy. And the Zen master poured the tea into the cup until the tea was overflowing. And the college professor went, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, what are you doing? The cup is full." And the Zen master said, "And this is you. Your mind is full of knowledge of what you think is true. Until you empty your mind or empty your cup, no more can fit." And that's sort of the thing with Eastern philosophy. It requires a shift of perception. It's a different way of looking at life. You change your mind by changing your perception. So we've talked all year about how people perceive things differently, and how you perceive things is how you create your reality. So here's an example. I think you guys know what those are. Those are gypsy moths. They're disgusting. Every few years they come out. A few years ago they came out. They eat all the leaves. They cover sides of the house, and they're really disgusting creatures. But the thing is, a shift of perception is gypsy moths won't be around if it rains a lot in April and May. Now, normally nobody really likes rain, but if it never rains in April and May, well, then the gypsy moths will basically thrive. But if you ultimately change how you observe rain, rain is a good thing in this moment. And so the shift of perception is sort of needed. If anybody's ever played with one of those magic eye things, you look at the picture long enough, you put your nose up close, and then an image appears. And when that image appears, it's kind of like a light switch just goes, and you understand. That's kind of what Eastern philosophy is. There's different ways of looking at things, and here's a couple of optical illusions. Simply by changing your perception, you can change your life. This is a painting by Salvador Dali. Salvador Dali's painting, it's called The Apparition of a Face and Fruit Dish on a Beach. If you look in the picture, you'd see a lot of different things. You might see, obviously, the face and fruit dish on the table, but in the back, you might see a dog. You might see the dog's eye is actually a kind of a bridge, and his snout is a road, and his collar is a bridge. And if you look even closer, there's a beach scene going on. There's a lot of different ways to observe this, a lot of different ways to perceive it. Now, this is Salvador Dali. He's not an Eastern philosopher. He's a surrealist painter. And he came up with a concept. He called it the paranoid critical theory of surrealism. You don't need to know what that's called, but he tried to use ambiguous images to force the brain to interpret it different ways. So that picture we just looked at, you could see different things in it. Ambiguous images, meaning you can take it two different ways. His goal was to get people to shift their perception. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Ultimately, we can look at the same things, but sometimes we actually see them as they really are when our perception changes. And Eastern philosophy tries to get that to occur. So there's three general features of Eastern philosophy, and we've introduced a couple of them. First, mysticism in nature. Mysticism, obviously, we talked about that in regards to Einstein. It's the understanding that maybe there's more to the world than what we can prove. It's the realization that maybe there's something magical in nature, like people like Emerson and Thoreau talked about. Then mindfulness, or being in the present. We've been talking about mindfulness all year long. As I've said to you, there's two different worlds. There's a 24/7, 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week movie, brand new, playing. It's life. We take it in with our senses. Or there's a second world, and that's the make-believe world of what we think about life. When you become mindful, you become in the present and not in that world of your thoughts and opinions. That's a big feature of Eastern philosophy. There's a story. A man is walking down the road, and all of a sudden, there's a tiger. And the man runs as fast as he can from the tiger. And the tiger's just at his heels about to get him. And the man is coming up to a cliff. He jumps off the cliff and he grabs onto the ground as he falls over the cliff, just evading the tiger. And he holds on just before he falls to a root. And the root supports him. He's hanging from the cliff. And he looks down and there's a lake below him. And in that lake, or a river, there are 2 alligators. He's in a jam. He's got a tiger above him in his past, and in front of him, below him, in his future, he has alligators when he falls. And then he realizes the root he's holding on to, there is a little mouse, and it's biting the root. And so it's beginning to give, and he's beginning to slide. And he realizes that root is about to fall, but he notices that root has a strawberry. And he takes the strawberry and he eats it, and he thinks, how delicious. Well, that's the story of being in the present moment. Sometimes we can't do anything about what's in our past or the future, being it tigers or crocodiles, but we can appreciate the present. Now, some people think that story's stupid and we should kick and scream and cry in those final moments, but to appreciate what is, be it the tasty strawberry, is the concept of mindfulness, of being mindful of what's going on right now. And then mind control and ego. Mind control is something we've sort of been talking about all year long. And the ego concept we've talked about in regards to you are not your thoughts. And we'll come back to that a lot more. Those 3 concepts definitely play a role in Eastern philosophy. So it's well known that our mind is going to affect our perceptions. And Eastern philosophy tries to get you to view the world without those preconceived notions. Literally the first day of class, first slide in class, I talked about expectations. And all of the expectations we have, they cause our suffering. Eastern philosophy wants you to engage in the world with an open mind. There's a story. When the whole world smells like fish, you are in need of cleaning your nose. Well, sometimes kids can figure this out, but the village story kind of shows it a little more adequately. A man was walking across the desert, and on the path coming the other direction was another man. And the other man, his name is Nasrudin. He comes up in a lot of our stories. The 2 men sit and they talk for a minute. And the first man asks Nasrudin, he says, did you come from that town off in the distance? And Nasrudin said, yes, I did. And he said, well, could you tell me what the people are like there? And Nasrudin said, yes, I can. But before, can you tell me what the people are like in the town that you're leaving? And the first man said, oh my God, those people were evil. They were all despicable. They're out to get me, every single one of them. I was lucky to escape with my life from that town. I hated those people. And so what's the town like I'm going to? And Nasrudin says, well, sorry to tell you, it's exactly like the town you left. The moral of the story is, I doubt every single person is out to get you, but if you perceive that they are, everybody will always be out to get you. So when the whole world smells like fish, maybe it's you who are perceiving it that way. You're in need of cleaning your nose or changing your perception. We don't necessarily see things as they are. We see them as we are. And that's the thing. If you're a negative glass half empty person, you're going to see everything in that way. If a pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees are his pockets. You will look for what you're looking for and see what you're looking for and miss everything else sometimes. That's because people don't have an open mind. They have what's called a confirmation bias. We're looking for facts to prove what we already think. But a lot of times we already have made up our minds with these preconceived notions. And the preconceived notions, if we can get away from those, we can actually take in the world as it is, not the way we have perceived it in the past. So in the video that hopefully played in the beginning, the anteater, to me, I've never seen an anteater that big. I thought anteaters were little guys. My preconceived notion was an anteater was, I don't know how big it would have been, but not as big as that thing that looked like a horse. And when I first saw the video, I was shocked because reality was different from how I perceived it. And that's sort of the key, to realize that our preconceived notions oftentimes just lock us into an observation that's not always true. When your mind tries to verify a preconceived notion, you can miss the obvious. We always have that confirmation bias. If you think you're free and you don't know you are in prison, you can't escape. Now, this guy, George Gurdjieff, he was a guy who wrote, a Russian philosopher who wrote a lot about mindfulness. And he said, ultimately, the way we look at the world is how we've imprisoned yourself. And that picture on the right kind of weirds me out, but you will never be free until you free yourself from the prison of your own false thoughts. A lot of people have, woe is me stories or inferiority complexes or whatever it might be. These are stories that we tell ourselves, and these thoughts are what legislates our lives. And Gurdjieff and others said, as long as you're stuck in your mind, stuck in the way you've been thinking, you are always enslaved, you are always in prison. You wake up in the morning and your mind becomes a jackhammer of thoughts. I got to make the coffee. I got to do laundry. I got to call them back. I need coffee. I have to go to the bathroom. This corner of the bed is warm. All day long, your whole day, you're in a prison of your mind. Day after day, as you do the same thing, controlled by a reactive mind. Awakening is realizing that there's more than the reactive mind. There is space between those thoughts. In other words, our mind will be like a jackhammer all day long, and it's almost running a program. And part of Eastern philosophy is getting you to get beyond those thoughts and actually maybe, as we talked about, to become witness to those thoughts rather than to be controlled by those thoughts. So, Eastern philosophy is going to be confusing to most Westerners. A Westerner is somebody from America or Europe, because we're brought up to have a certain way of looking at things. We're very individualistic. We are very practical and we analyze things. We love science. And so, because Eastern philosophy is so different from that, it confuses a lot of people. So, this PowerPoint is just designed to give you a little bit of a few concepts to make it a little easier to understand. So, wisdom is a state of mind and an approach to life that cannot be reduced into words. And now Wilcox is going to try to explain with words, which is unfortunately the only tool we have. Eastern philosophy is more about experience and perspective and mindset over the Western way that we use to argue. So, from the view of an Eastern philosopher, they look at how we always try to analyze things and chop them up into little pieces as a waste of time. To them, the most important thing is the experience in the present moment. And you can explain what something is, but it will never be that thing. So, a story that kind of illustrates this is the story of the young burglar. So, the father told his son, I'm getting a little bit older, I need to teach you the family trade. And the son did not know what his dad did, and the dad explained, I'm a burglar. And son said, well, can you teach me how to be a burglar? And dad said, absolutely, so come up with me tonight. And they went and they came to a house, and dad showed him how to get over the fence, and dad showed the son how to pry open the door, and they tiptoed up into the attic, and the father explained to the son, usually the best riches are up in a big crate up in the attic. So they went up to the attic, and dad showed him how to open up the crate, and he told the son, look in there, get inside the crate, you'll find the riches down in the bottom. And the son listened to his father, and he got into the crate to get the boxes, to get the riches, and the father shut the crate, locked it, and tiptoed out of the house, locking his son in the crate. The dad got out to the front door and then took a rock, and threw it through the window in the attic, and then leisurely walked home. Well, the people in the house heard the window break in the attic, and they rush up into the attic. There's 3 people, and the son is in the crate. He's literally hiding for his life, hoping they don't find him. And the people go up there, and there's a broken window, and they're looking around. They don't see anything. And then they eventually realize, well, there's nothing going up here, and they're about to leave. And then the son thinks, holy crap, like if they leave, I could die in here. So the son starts scratching at the top of the crate. And the last person goes, what's that? And he goes over and opens up the crate, and the son pushes them out of the way and goes sprinting down the stairs, pushes the other people on the stairs out of the way, and he goes running across the wilderness. And the 3 people go chasing after him, and they chase, and the son gets to a well and takes a boulder and throws it into the well, trying to make them think that it was his body, and the son kind of creeps away. Well, luckily for him, the people thought he fell into the well, and they're looking in the well. The son goes home and he says to his father, what was that? You were supposed to teach me how to be a burglar. Like, I could have been killed. I could have been captured. And the father said, what better way to learn to be a burglar than to burgle and to understand all of the ramifications of it? So a lot of times experience, we can explain it, but only through living it is what's really important. And Eastern philosophy is much more about that lived present experience. A teacher is never a giver of truth. He is a guide, a pointer to the truth that each student must find for himself. This is Bruce Lee. Most people know him as a martial artist. kung fu karate guy, but he has a lot of great deep thoughts in relation to Eastern philosophy and Taoism. And that's sort of, I subscribe to this theory that I can point you in a direction and then you can take what you want from it. But you must find for yourself your own truth. So if in Eastern philosophy they don't use words as much, I mean, the idea of silence is definitely found in meditation. A meditation, Hindu and Buddhist meditation, the idea is to silence yourself, not just your mouth, but also your mind. And in doing so, you can create more concentration and a little more clarity or clearness of vision. And we'll talk about meditation in the upcoming weeks. But rather, like in America, most people can't stand a quiet moment. Everybody has to keep talking. They much more are about the silence of the mind. While Eastern philosophy deals with not having thoughts, while Western philosophy is about thinking. The idea, if all your thoughts can dissolve and you're no longer thinking, then you can be who you really are. In other words, your thoughts get in your way in the attitude of Eastern philosophy. So Buddhists, Hindus, Taoists, they all see enlightenment. Enlightenment is that light bulb moment where you just get it, and it's not some heavenly vision where the angels play, oh, and all of a sudden you get it, but rather they look at it. If you if you strip away all of your normal attitudes and all of your desires and dislikes, if you can get rid of that, then you can see everyday life, ordinary reality, as being more miraculous. And the idea of meditation is you can achieve this. Now, a lot of kids will try meditation and they don't like it because it's, what are we doing? I could be doing something else. But the idea is by silencing your mind, you can perhaps get a grasp of a bigger truth. The beginner's mind is a concept that we will talk about throughout Eastern philosophy. The beginner's mind is what you had as a little kid when you were very open-minded and always asking questions. So that's the goal in Eastern philosophy, is to get back to that mind. If you get rid of all of those expectations and preconceptions of how things happen and how they're going to work, if you can fill yourself with curiosity and wonder, open yourself up to possibility, ask questions, you'll be aware of what's going on. You won't just be going through the program in your mind of your thoughts, the same program you've been running your whole life. Instead, you stop sleepwalking and you wake up back to that beginner's mind you used to have when you were younger. Eastern sages, which basically means philosophers, they often rely on parables, riddles, stories, analogies to express their teachings. There's the stuff that they teach, oftentimes they come at you from different directions. To somebody who's not really paying attention or getting it, it might seem repetitive. But it's more of a circular way of explaining things, and maybe the fifth time you knock on the door in a different way, finally the door to your mind will open. And here's an example of a story that explains this concept. The two monks and a lady. There were two, I think they were Buddhist monks, and they had taken a vow of silence. They were not allowed to speak. And then also they had taken a vow of never engaging with women, touching women, talking to women. And these two monks had been not talked for months. And they're walking through the woods together, and they come across a river, and there's a beautiful young girl, and she says, oh, thank God somebody's come. I need to get across the river, but I don't want to get my brand new kimono wet. My father gave it to me. Will one of you men please carry me across the river? Well, the two monks aren't supposed to talk, and they're not supposed to deal with women. And they looked at each other, and then one monk obviously ignored her and started walking across the river. The second monk said, okay, I will carry you. And he picked her up and carried her across the river. While he's carrying her across the river, the first monk was just shocked and just bothered because he talked and he touched her, and what the heck's going on? And the guy just carried her across the river, dropped her on the other side, and they went along with their day. 3 days later, the two monks are still walking quietly when the first monk yells, what was that? Why did you do that? You're not supposed to touch people, you touch women, you're not supposed to talk, and just went off for like 5 minutes. He'd been bothered, obviously, for the past couple of days. And the monk who carried the woman across the river said, I left the lady on the other side of the river. Why are you still carrying her? A lot of times we carry concepts, so we don't let them go, and our mind and our memories often hamstring us. And the first monk said, why are you still carrying this? So these stories are designed to give you different ways of looking at things. As I said, obviously a lot of times they do seem a little repetitive. Everything changes, often in a cyclical manner, and all things are interrelated. We've talked about change earlier in the year with Heraclitus. The circular manner, if you look at the cyclical manner, if you look in the bottom, that circled is yin-yang, which we will talk about in regards to Taoism. But in Eastern philosophy, there is an interconnected harmony that we don't always understand. Think of like bees and flowers, for instance. Alan Watts, who's a British guy who is a master of Eastern philosophy, he talks about a cloth and a thread. Like, you could look at the cloth, or you could realize the cloth is made up of many, many different threads. And we're all ultimately interconnected. As I've said in class before, you could think you're an individual, or then you could realize that half of your lungs are up in the trees in regards to the oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange that trees have with humans. We are much more connected, interconnected than we realize in the Western world. Yoda from Star Wars. Yoda basically represents a Taoist philosopher, so to speak, maybe Lao Tzu. And this quote is from the first or second Star Wars film. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the force around you, here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, everywhere. So the concept of the force is that everything is interrelated. And the part at the top about luminous beings are we, not this crude matter meaning our bodies, materialism. He's saying luminous meaning more spirit. And some people feel connected to everything around them. And that's one of the things that Eastern philosophy tends to teach. As we said, the oneness that unites and transcends things. That goes against the way we look at things. You can look at what nature is. We are part of nature. So the purpose of Eastern philosophy isn't to try to define the world or analyze the world, but to live in harmony with it, since we are in fact part of it, that interconnected aspect. The way we think of life in the Western world is we are independent against the world. And the way they look at it is we are part of the world. Eastern philosophy, much less individualistic, a lot more we versus me. The concept here is we, as I said, get stuck with ourselves, the individualism. We are powered to do the best we can, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But Eastern philosophy tends to believe that rather than we are independent people working against the world, but rather we are part of something that is a lot greater. I actually said last year, as the pandemic was beginning to start, that I thought countries in the eastern part of the world, meaning like Japan, China, India, countries that have more of this philosophy might do better than more individual countries like America, because they are more willing to sacrifice for one another, where we're more interested in the me rather than the we. And so if the YouTube video, if the nature video showed, when we looked at the ants all working towards one collective goal, that's not something you often see in the Western world. We often get these thought barriers. And the thought barriers, we are so strong and innovative and we can figure things out, but this same way of thinking oftentimes leads to negative ways of looking at life, leads to things like loneliness, alienation, and guilt. We tend to isolate ourselves from the rest of existence. It's us against the world. Eastern is much more about the group dynamic. From Einstein, the American lives even more for his goals for the future than the European. Life for him is always becoming, never being. And Einstein, when he said this, think about the concept. Most of the time we're always thinking about a goal we have to reach, and we always have to become something else. And we never, many people never can actually just rest in the comfort of being as they are in that moment. There's a Zen philosopher we'll cover, and he says, you are perfect as you are, and you can use some improvement. But many people in the Western world always have to become something, and there's a drive, and as a result, we're not able to relax in who we are in that moment. There's a story, a Zen master has a student come visit him, and the student says, I want to learn everything you know, Zen master. How long will it take? And the Zen master says, it will take 10 years. And the student says, wait a minute, 10 years? I don't have that long. What if I study 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? I study so hard. Then how long will it take? The Zen master said, if you study that hard, it will take you 20 years. And the student went, what? If I study twice as hard, it's going to take twice as long? That doesn't make any sense. And the master says, if you've got 2 eyes on your goal, you have no eye on the path. And ultimately, it's the path that brings us to the goal. That path is life. Life is not a burden, but we make it one when we refuse to accept things as they are. This is Baba Haridasi. He's an Indian sage philosopher. I said earlier in the year, there's 2 ways of looking at life. One is the way it is, and the one is the way we wish it was. And I think we get stuck making life a burden because we cannot accept that sometimes things are just the way they are. Zen Patriarch of China, the great way is easy for one with no preferences. This goes back to the expectations and the preconceived notions we carry around. If we just go through life and accept what happens and work with the changes, rather than fight against them, life is a lot easier. A story going with Nasruddin. Nasruddin went to his neighbor's house and he said, I'd like to borrow the big pot you have because I have a dinner party coming up. And Nasruddin was known to be kind of a weaselly guy who wouldn't always return things he borrowed. And the owner said, okay, Nasruddin, I guess I'll let you have the pot, but please give it back next week. I really need that pot. That's my favorite pot. And a week went by, and the knock on the door, and Nasruddin returned with the pot. And the neighbor was just surprised because Nasruddin was so unreliable. And on top of the pot, there was a little cloth. And he pulled the cloth off, and inside the pot, there was another little pot. And Nasruddin, the guy said, Nasruddin, this pot inside is not mine. And Nasruddin said, it is now yours. The pot had a baby. And the man was like, the pot had a baby? Oh, okay, fine, great. Thank you, Nasruddin. He was so excited because he was not expecting to even get the pot back, and now he got an extra one. So a month later, when Nasruddin knocked on the door and asked to borrow the pot again, the owner was like, oh, please, Nasruddin, have it. Go ahead, take it as long as you want, because he had expectations of what would happen when it was returned. Well, this time, Nasruddin did not return it for a week, for 2 weeks, for a month. Finally, one day, the man ran into Nasruddin in the agora, in the square, and he said, Nasruddin, whatever happened with that pot? And Nasruddin said, I'm sorry to tell you, but the pot has died. And he said, what? What do you mean the pot has died? That doesn't make any sense. He goes, the pot was poisoned. And he goes, what? What are you talking about? How could the pot be poisoned? You expect me to believe that? And Nasruddin said, well, you believe the pot had the baby, so... The idea is our expectations. The first time the guy did not want to loan out his pot, and then he was surprised when he had something returned to him inside of it. So his expectations were so high, what was going to happen the next time? And the next time, the pot died, and it was stolen from him. That's the way of life. We have expectations, and that's what makes life so difficult. So, Eastern philosophy is going to deal with a number of different philosophies that we're going to cover. Advaita Vedanta is the philosophical school of India. Jainism is what Gandhi practiced. Taoism is the yin-yang, go with the flow. Confucius is a very wise man who was a little more Western in his ideals compared, honestly, to the other philosophers. And then Buddhism, which is one of the major concepts that kids tend to like in this class. And then Zen. Zen is that live in the moment. Sometimes you hear it referred to as Zen Buddhism. We'll cover all of those in the next few weeks. So just to review, Eastern versus Western. Yoda representing the Eastern view of things being universal and everything being in harmony. And the Western view is more individual and accumulation of knowledge and trying to control things. So hopefully you got something out of this intro, and in the upcoming days, we will continue down this path. Make sure you write a journal.